Hey guys, what's going on? This is day 2 of the AnCapistan's channel, and I just wanted to go ahead and make a couple videos today. Just a quick update. While I will be able to make videos throughout this week, I don't know if I'll be able to make new content next week because I've got a lot going on, but I am going to pre-record a lot of videos that are kind of about broader concepts. So I'll be able to cover more of the current events this week, specifically pertaining to North Korea and stuff, but I'm not going to be able to cover things like current events next week. So next week I do still plan to be uploading, but I'll be uploading pre-recorded videos. So anyways, with that out of the way, I wanted to go ahead and talk about why private solutions to what are currently government services would be desirable. This is kind of playing off my video I did yesterday. If you want to check that out, please do. Talking about the fundamentals of anarcho-capitalism and talking about our philosophical and moral basis for anarcho-capitalism, voluntarism, that kind of thing. So today I want to talk about some practical solutions. One of the first objections that people will bring up when you try to propose anarcho-capitalism is, oh, well, who will build the roads? This is a pretty common thing that comes up because you've been taught to believe and indoctrinated to believe through public school and all this kind of stuff that we need government in order to build the roads. That's something that has been drilled into your psyche, if you will. So I wanted to kind of go over, one, why private solutions would be feasible, and two, why they're desirable. First of all, private companies already build our roads. The way that the current system works, roughly, this is not going to be a super in-depth look, but just a rough idea of how the roads are constructed, is that the government hires private companies to build roads. Now, the government kind of has their overall, highway system plan, they do the overall thing, but the actual building of the roads is already done by private companies. So, you're not gonna see any politicians out there with a shovel, The roads are built by private companies already. So, therefore, people might wonder, well, why would it be in the interest of private corporations to hire these private, road constructing companies to build the roads? And that's because having roads to your business provides people with access to your business. For example, say that you own a donut shop and you want people to come to your donut shop, and say that there are no roads that exist to get there. You're going to be incentivized to construct roads from the nearest neighborhoods to your store to get people to come and buy from you. One really funny thing, which I'll try to, on my video, put some pictures of it. Domino's is actually starting a program where they will come and fill in potholes, if you call that there's one there, in order for their pizza delivery guys to have smoother transit when delivering their pizza. That's a real thing that's happening right now. So private companies already build the roads. We're already having private companies maintain and repair roads with this Domino's story. And private companies have an incentive to build roads. Roads would be one of the first things built. And I've heard Mr. Dapperton make this point, and it's so true. Like, if the free market can produce a cell phone, which is a highly advanced computer in your pocket with which you can communicate with anyone on the face of planet Earth, if the free market can produce that, you don't think it can produce a flat plane of, gravel, you really don't think that that the free market can build a road when it can construct all these other things? The incentives are there. Private companies already do it. Private companies are already maintaining the roads. And yeah, there's no reason why we wouldn't have roads in an AnCap society. We probably would have roads built more efficiently as well. The government doesn't do any of these things efficiently because the government has no competition. So the government has no incentive to do these things with any kind of efficiency. So those are the roads out of the way. Well, now you're probably wondering, well, okay, so fine. So in AnCapistan, you'll be able to build the roads. How are you going to deal with police in AnCapistan? And that's a great question. Well, the police, and the way that the police work now is obviously they're run by the government, and you call them in, when the crime is taking place or whatever, and then they show up. And the actual police response time, I don't have the stats right in front of me, I probably should, but the actual police response time is extreme. It's not very good. I'll leave a link in the description to some stats about that. It's not that great. There are real private security forces that do exist in some neighborhoods and places like that have much faster response time. And the thing about having private security is that when you have, just like in anything else, when you have competition, there is an incentive to strive to please the consumer more, right? Let's take an example of phone companies. If there was only one phone company, there wouldn't be incentive for that phone company to lower prices or improve service. Why? Because there's only one phone company. And monopolies happen that way. There are effective monopolies some places. Where I live, which I'm not going to say exactly where, I'm not going to say where I live, but where I live, there's basically only one cable provider. And that's because, and as we may get into another video, monopolies are largely due to government. But there's only one cable company where I live, basically. There's a couple of alternatives, but there's really one. That cable company, the service is not always the best, because they don't really have that much competition, so they're not incentivized to improve. So the same thing with private security forces. Private security forces are going to be incentivized to have faster response times than their competitors. They're going to be incentivized to be more nonviolent than their competitors. They're going to be incentivized to provide the best service than their competitors. And that's, now, someone may be wondering, well, couldn't you just, have these private police forces somehow take over and be like a government or something like that? And to that I would say no, for the simple fact that because they're not powered by taxes, but they're solely powered by voluntary monetary exchange, the people would just hire another police force. And let's take a hypothetical. Let's say that in any town, USA, a police force is a private police force, private security. Let's say this is AnCapistan. Is taking over a neighborhood, okay, and they're extorting people. Some other private police force is going to come in, get those guys out of the way, and then receive the business of those customers. So even if the worst somehow happened, which it really wouldn't be able to because people will just take their money elsewhere, but even if it did, there would be incentive for other companies to stop it. So this idea that private security would take over, it's faulty. It's not true. It's under the assumption that they would always have monetary support, and they wouldn't always have monetary support, because if they try to do anything that the consumers don't like, the money is pulled out from under them. And then, I guess they could try to steal from the population, but in that case, like I already said, the other private security force would be incentivized to come and stop that, and in order to get the business of those people. So yeah, that's basically private security forces. There's so many ways in which private security forces would work, and because it would probably be more localized, it wouldn't be as centralized. There'd be a lot more of them out there. People would probably be a lot safer. The neighborhoods that do have private security are a lot safer. But yeah, that would be security. So we've been over roads. We've been over security. Now, another thing that people wonder about is they wonder, well, what about an invading force? What if, let's say that here in the United States, let's say we had AnCapistan, and let's say that China decides that, we're going to try to take over the U.S. Let's say that happens. What would prevent that? Because people live under this assumption that, well, without a standing military, how in the world could we ever defend ourselves against invasion? Well, for one thing, which I don't know if I've really addressed this in my videos, but I think it's a pretty common thing to know about if you are familiar with anarcho-capitalism at all. But if not, guns are obviously highly encouraged for the purpose of self-defense in anarcho-capitalist philosophy. And the population would be armed to the teeth. And that is a big deterrent to invasion, especially if there is no gun registry, which there wouldn't be, because, here, let me get a sip of my coffee, because the invading force wouldn't know which doors had teeth behind them and which ones didn't. And there's actually real historical precedents for this. After World War II, when the U.S. began kind of interrogating or talking to a lot of these Japanese generals, and they asked them, why didn't you guys just, like, invade the United States? And they said, and there's a quote about this, there would be a gun under every blade of grass. The Japanese didn't want to invade because they knew that the population was armed to the teeth and that the losses that their army would incur would have been massive. So the U.S. having guns, having Second Amendment rights, is what prevented a Japanese invasion of the mainland. They won't tell you that in textbooks, but it's the truth. And there's historical precedent for that. Why did Adolf Hitler invade all the countries around Switzerland, but he didn't invade Switzerland? That's because Switzerland has the right to bear arms, and there was no gun registry. Some of the other countries had guns, but they had gun registries, which means that Hitler knew where the guns were going to be. In Switzerland, he did not know. Adolf Hitler hated the Swiss. It wasn't because Switzerland was a neutral country. Do you think that Adolf Hitler was going to respect Switzerland's neutral status? He would have taken them over gladly, if not for the fact that they had the right to keep and bear arms, and that makes it extremely difficult for an invading force. And I've heard people argue, well, but your own private gun in your home isn't going to prevent, say, a fighter jet. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess, invaders could, blow things up, but once the military is gone in an AnCap society and the military has to sell all of its equipment, private security forces and these kind of things are going to own military jets and military-grade equipment that we would be able to use to defend ourselves. And on top of that, it's under the assumption that people are only going to have the kind of firearms they have now. But there's going to be all kinds of people out there that still are going to have military-grade weapons in AnCapistan, which I may make a whole nother video about the nuclear issue in AnCapistan and how you would deal with nukes. But yeah, so those are just 3 examples of how we could have private solutions to defensive military, private solutions to security, private solutions to roads, private solutions to welfare or charity, right? People are always wondering, well, what about the poor? What would happen with the poor if there was no welfare? The United States, let's just take the United States as an example. I know there's other countries, but just as an American, I'm most knowledgeable about the country in which I live. The United States is the most charitable country in the world. 60% of the population has participated in charitable giving at some point. Half the country votes for the Democrats because, and this is not true, but they think that it's going to help the poor. It doesn't help the poor, but they think it's going to help the poor. So they vote for the Democrats because they want to help the poor. You don't think that those people who had money in a free society would do things to help the poor? There would absolutely be people doing things to help the poor. Bill Gates does charitable work. Almost all these billionaires do charitable work in other countries where there is no welfare state. And, they don't have a profit incentive to do that. They're doing that because they want to. And if there was no welfare state, the same thing would be here. Here in the United States, before we had a welfare state, we actually had a lot more charitable giving than we do now. Stefan Molyneux has some good videos about that, where it's like the United States used to do way more charitable giving than it does now because we have a welfare state. So we could very easily take care of the poor in a free society. So I just wanted to go over those things, but I just want people to realize that there are alternatives to the way we do things now. And just because we've never been stateless before doesn't mean that there aren't plausible solutions to these problems in a stateless society. So with that, that's going to wrap up the video, and thank you for watching.